Hello again. Welcome back to the second part of our morning session. Before I introduce the members of our panel, I just want to say something that I could and should have said this morning, just to let people know that the NCSE has recently commissioned a piece of research on the impact of COVID-19 on young people with special education needs. It's going to be done by the School of Education in UCD for a year with the possibility of extending it for a second year. And I think they'll have plenty to build on from what we heard in our earlier session. So we have, as I say, 4 panelists, each of whom is going to speak for about 10 minutes. And then it will come back for some discussion and questions from you. I'm going to introduce all 4 at the same time, so the first is Niamh Corrigan, who is Principal of St. Declan Special School in Dublin. Then is Ashlyn Faye, who is Principal of Gaelscoil Fuinseoige in Dublin. Claire O'Neill is the Deputy Principal and Special Needs Coordinator in St. Michael's Church of Ireland National School in Cork. And Fiona Temple, who's Principal of Mulroy College in Donegal. So I'll hand over to Niamh now, who will in turn hand over to Ashlyn and so on.
Thank you. As Peter said, my name is Niamh Corrigan. I am the principal of St. Declan's Special School in Ballsbridge. We are a school that caters specifically for children in the mild range of social, emotional and behavioural difficulties. We are quite a unique school in that we follow a transitionary model. We have 36 students who come to us from mainstream settings and work with us for an average of 2 to 3 years with the view of transitioning back to mainstream school. We're set up over 6 classes with 6 children in each class with 1 teacher and 2 special needs assistants. Many of the children that come to us have needs such as autism, ADHD, ADD, and so on. But over the last 2 years in our admissions, we've seen a huge rise in the number of children that are struggling with anxiety in the mainstream classroom. And so this year, in our cohort of children that came into the school in September, there was quite a number that had not actually physically been in a school building since pre-pandemic. And so with those children in mind, and when we returned to school after the lockdown in September 2020, our focus was very much around the concept that NEPS had developed of slowing down to catch up. And so with that in mind, we were very much focused on, yes, looking after the academics, but also looking after the well-being of the whole school community, staff and students. And to do that, we looked at our environment. We were teaching our numeracy and literacy within the classroom, but we also looked at our outdoor environment and our locality. And I suppose we've been very lucky. The location that our school is set in, we have many great facilities on our doorstep. So many of the teachers took that opportunity to teach the SESE curriculum through the outdoors, which was such a great way of teaching in the COVID climate. So also with that, we reduced the amount of technology physically within the classes, as we felt some of our students who had struggled during the lockdown and engaging in online learning felt almost that there needed to be a digital detox within the classroom setting. But in saying that, our homework looked more towards the online platforms. And then specifically then, we also brought in a number of specific initiatives within the school. The first one that I'm going to speak about is what we called the power of positive language to impact behavioural challenges. So as I said, our school specifically works with children who have social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, and we felt that our children have always been vulnerable, but with the added pressures of the lockdown and COVID-19, they became even more marginalised. So we felt that there was so much negativity around in the world that they were listening to, that we as a staff needed to come together and work on using positive language within the school. And when we started to look at that, we started to delve into a little bit of research, and we looked at the concept of growth mindset and our language when working with the children around, can you do this? And I can do this, and I will learn to do it, as opposed to being on the negative. And it was reframing and relearning for staff and students in how to problem solve and think of the difficult things that we can and can't do, which then led us into looking at the research of Carol Dweck, who was quite popular in educational psychology around the use of the word yet. And we felt that that was something that was really, really important in our school, and using this power of the word yet, that I cannot do something yet. So using the word yet shows that we can get there. You know, I can learn to do something, and I can pick up new skills. Similarly, another initiative that we brought into our school was the Weaving Wellbeing. Again, last year when we all returned in September 2020, we saw the need for focusing on the well-being of our staff and students. And we got along from September to Christmas, you know, thinking about well-being, having conversations. And then I had recently heard about the Weaving Wellbeing programme. And as we know, in January, we were hit yet again with school closures. So as a school, we made the decision to train in the Weaving Wellbeing programme, and all of the staff engaged in online training for the Weaving Wellbeing programme, which we then rolled out to students this September. And we have taken our own initiative and our own slant on the Weaving Wellbeing programme in terms of looking at the character strengths, which is a big part of the programme, and how we can use that in our school. So we have developed a Hall of Fame for our students, and they are choosing specific character strengths to work on. So just last week, I was in one of our junior classrooms, and I asked, what character strength are you working on? And the children were able to tell me that they were working on the character strength of self-control. So with that, the children are working towards a character strength, and the staff and students are all looking out for little examples of each other showing that character strength. And when they've showed 3 pieces of evidence towards that character strength, they earn a badge, and we display it in our school Hall of Fame in the school hall. And also we have sashes for all of the children for them to place their badges. And finally, one of the other initiatives that we have spent quite a bit of time working on within the school this year is training 3 members of staff in the Parents Plus programme. We as a school feel that our whole message and our ethos of our school is built around not just helping the children, but helping the families. And Parents Plus is a positive parenting programme for the parents and how to deal with challenging behaviour. And again, we felt this was a very worthwhile training and programme to engage with, as many of our parents and many of the families in our school were struggling post-lockdown, and they felt that some of the behaviours that they were seeing at home had escalated since COVID. So with that, as I said, 3 members of staff trained in the programme this summer, and we have just finished our first session with parents. We ran a 6-week programme and had very positive feedback from the parents. In the main concept around the programme is this pause, tune in plan, and that is something that we have rolled out throughout the whole school community, and something that all of our staff are using within the school context when there are challenges and when there is, you know, difficulties, and it prevents you know, be it adults or in school and adults at home, you know, reaching a boiling point with the children when they're really frustrated. So we feel that using that positive language, again, back to our earlier initiative around positive language, the pause, tune in plan really feeds into that whole situation. And all of the staff have engaged in that. And I think by engaging with the Parenting Plus and our use of the positive language strategies within the school, what we have seen is a decrease in very challenging behaviour, because we are pausing, we're taking the step back when the children are very frustrated and heading towards a very difficult time, and we're giving them the space to regulate their own emotions, and we as adults are tuning into ourselves, but we're also giving the children an opportunity to tune in to their own emotions. And then we're also giving them an opportunity to come together to plan what is the next step forward. So overall, I feel that it has been a very difficult 18 months in school life, in special ed. But I think through the use of all of our different strategies, we have managed to create a very positive, happy and caring environment within the constraints for our students. And we're very proud of where we're going. And I think, there has been so much negativity around COVID, but for us, we've taken a lot of positives and we've implemented some really great strategies since COVID that we hope to bring on throughout the years in hopefully what will be the pre-pandemic. Thank you. I'll pass over now to Ashlyn.
Gurmagat Niamh. Is mis Ashlyn Faye is príomhide mé in Gaelscoil na Fuinseoige in Maileán Temple. Is scoil gáthra atá going sa scoil, cílíonn sé sin go bhfuil gárang do gach ísgrúpa, agus tá rang a going do fáistíle uachas comá. Tá séir sa rang sin mar atá ag Niamh comá, agus is tócan ar bhí mar ag fila ar an scoil gur béis sin an phríocht do bhí a going ná díreú ar riachtanis na báistí agus na páistí le riachtanis go speisialta sa scoil. So, like Niamh, we adapted the NEP's philosophy of slow down to catch up. We knew that the children were coming from a different place to where they had left the school, and we wanted them to come back and to be as secure and safe, feel as safe as possible in the school. One of the parents mentioned to me before we actually returned that her child, who was only 6, had been extremely happy in school before we closed, and it was a really happy environment, and she didn't want that to change, that the first day back wasn't going to be with very negative messaging about COVID and all the yellow signs. So we were really conscious of that, and that was something that stayed in my mind, that we wanted the school to be as safe and as secure for the children as possible. So as a profession, we have a very much a can-do approach, and I think that stood to us, and it was the foundation stone in my school in particular for the success. The staff were willing to go the extra mile for the children so that the transition would be as seamless as possible. We believed that time was needed for children to settle into this new routine, and that they would be ready to engage. We prioritise a focus on well-being in order to yield positive outcomes in the longer term and to reduce stress. Our approach aimed to make the children feel as safe as possible in school, and we were conscious, like that parent said, that we didn't change the environment as too much. So we tried to lessen the COVID message. We had as many child-friendly posters around the school. Gaelidicus, we are a Gaelscoil, and Gaelidicus provided fantastic posters, Osgailga, cartoon-based, very child-friendly, and it just made the message less negative. As Fiona said, we didn't want that negative language, Niamh, we didn't want that negative language in the school, and we wanted the children to feel as safe as possible. So I'll just go to the first day back at school. And it was a small but a very meaningful step. We asked the parents to come a little bit later into school that day so that the children with additional needs didn't feel daunted by the big crowds coming in the door. And we had familiar faces standing at the gate ready to greet them. So each child had a member of staff whom he or she was familiar with, waiting for them to greet them when they came in. And if that child was a little bit anxious, they were brought to the school garden. We, like Niamh did, we used our environment, and during COVID we created a school garden and an outdoor classroom. So it was a space that the children could feel secure in, with sensory areas. They could also go to the playground. We invested some money in, not a lot, but we invested wisely in some sensory activities for the children outdoors, just to make them that little bit happier and feel that little bit more secure, to lessen the anxiety if we could. So we had visual schedules. Our whole emphasis was on the children's routine and making them feel safe. And each staff member had visual cues and prompts in their pockets or on their body, so that if a child was making that transition from the school bus into the classroom, we had visual prompts ready for them in order to help them. As I said, we had to take a few steps back in order to go forward, and we found the NEP's document that we have here, supporting the wellbeing of the school community, a fantastic help. Also, the NCSE provided fantastic supports on their website for us returning to school, which we used. So planning was an integral part of the success of returning to school. And we know as educators that the most important thing to do is to start, when we're teaching anything, to start where the children are at and to build on that. And we knew that children would have taken a few steps backwards, and we'd spoken to parents and we planned accordingly. We created social stories for them, and this was all done in advance. We tried to preempt different occasions during the school day where they might feel anxious or there would be change in their routine. Lucina Clinic had a lot of them on their website, which we adapted for our school. Also, As I Am created a lot of resources, Gaelscoil, which was of huge benefit to us because we do spend a lot of time translating, so we're grateful to them for that. So we really wanted the children to be happy, so we had to bring them to back to the school where they felt secure, that school that they knew that they were going inside the door and they were able to predict what happened. On the management side of things, as principals, we were all aware that with COVID times that we're all dealing with today, trying to deal with teacher absenteeism, which may not have been as big a feature. So our class for children with autism was a priority for us. We didn't want those children to have to deal with any other change. So if there was an absenteeism in that class, we wanted whomever was going into the class for it to be as seamless as possible. So we upskilled a member of our SET team so that she was in the classroom as often as possible, so the children became familiar with her and she with them. So in the case, which there was absenteeism in the special class, somebody was ready to step into that role. And we then, it meant that if we got a substitute teacher, that teacher could go into the SET role where children didn't feel as anxious with a new face coming in. And that was a very important aspect for us. At that point as well, we were able to bank our hours, which meant if we weren't able to get a sub on a given day, we could keep those hours and use the sub again so that no child suffered. And that was really important for us. As I said a couple of minutes ago, we also purchased some equipment in the school, sensory equipment and playground equipment, so that the children, that transition from home to school, having been at home for so long, was a little bit more enjoyable. We're only sorry that we didn't do it beforehand because they've been a huge success. We have climbing walls outside. I know of other schools who purchased sensory pods. We have a sensory room in our school, but they purchased sensory pods and they said that it was a really a great therapy for the children on returning. So yeah, that was another positive. As Niamh said, you know, it wasn't all negative. There are a lot of things that we've learned from it. Before opening, we reviewed all our SET timetables with a huge focus on circle time and social skills group, because we knew that unless our children had felt secure and had the confidence back in school, there was no point introducing new maths concepts or spellings. They had to feel happy back, and we didn't know what impact the pandemic and the school closure had on individual children. So we felt this was our priority, and it was really, really successful. All of the groups were based on play, fun, cooking, and learning new skills, but in a non-threatening environment. So the children were comfortable with the activity they were engaging in, and we've discovered a fantastic resource that the NEPS had on their website. It's an old one, setting up a social skills training group, which we found invaluable. It helped us to structure our play groups very well, and to use the appropriate language and give the children the appropriate language. So again, like Niamh, primary schools, it's great to be reassured that we're all doing the same thing, so we must be doing something right. We also introduced weaving wellbeing into the school because we knew that, you know, we were all feeling anxious and our children would be feeling anxious coming back. And the weaving wellbeing programme has recently been adapted for junior infants. So we used that programme to give the children the language that they needed to discuss their feelings and their anxieties and their fears. So I was with a little child the other day from the autism class, and this was a child who may not have used a huge amount of language before this, and I was delighted when he turned to me. When we walked into a hall, there was a lot of noise, and he just looked up and he said, "Aisling, I'm scared." He hadn't that language beforehand, and that was brought from that. So again, a positive. We all learn all the time, and we have learned a lot from this. So we also used NEPS, Friends for Life. A number of the teachers are qualified in Friends for Life, and we adapted that for our school as well. In order, as I said from the start, the most important thing for us is that the children felt secure coming into school, and that they were happy, and that they were back into their routine, and that it wasn't a negative environment. So once we felt that they were back in a place that they were ready to learn, because it's so important that they're ready, we then started introducing the academic. We took a couple of steps back and we built on that. So there was no threatening new concepts that they may feel intimidated by. We started where they were to give them confidence and build on. So that was very, very helpful as well. So going forward, we have learned a lot, and we're hoping we're coming to the end of it and we won't be going through it again, but a lot of positives that we will be taking forward. The Minister this morning in her address mentioned the class hours, and they will be a huge benefit to schools and to all the children who have suffered in any different way because of the school closures, and we're very grateful to those. I'll just finish on a very small note, something in all our preparation, and we were busy 2 years ago getting hand sanitisers in the classrooms and putting up our posters, but I didn't anticipate that the hand sanitisers would be used as hair gel or as a drink. So we've had to remove a lot of the hand sanitising units in the classrooms because much and all as they liked styling their hair with them, it wasn't really what we wanted for. So that's another learning. Okay, garam melam fad. Claire.
Thanks so much, Aisling and Niamh. It's lovely to hear the experiences in other primary schools. It's just a privilege to hear from both of you, so thanks for that. I'll start off as well by putting my school into context, because I think context is very important here. So I am Deputy Principal in a small Church of Ireland school very close to Cork City. It's a very rapidly growing and evolving school. 49% of our pupils will be on a staged approach. Most of those pupils would have professional reports. So we have a new leadership team. Both the principal and I are in our roles about a year now, and this really has been a baptism of fire. So we have 2 autism classes in our school that were established to meet the needs of our school community. We would have a very firm commitment to inclusion. It's enacted in our way of being. It's formalised in our SEN and inclusion policy, and it's based on shared core values of care, kindness and inclusion. So we really benefit from a very diverse staff. We have neurodiverse staff on our staff as well, which really helps us be a fully inclusive school. So in preparation for going back to school, there is the real practical elements that we won't talk about, the hand sanitizer and all of that, but we really had to take a collaborative approach, and our relationships in the staff are really important. Our relationships in the school community are so important to us, and those strong relationships really helped us have a successful return to school. With that, we also wanted to look at what would be best practice on returning to school. So we used a range of frameworks that are available to all schools. So the inclusive framework that has been developed by the NCSE would probably be our cornerstone. And then we would have looked at the 2019 framework for wellbeing. We would have looked at looking at our schools as well, and of course NEP's continuum of support. So with those frameworks, we devised a plan for a return to school. When we self-reflected on our needs for back to school, we established 4 main areas that came from the themes in the NCSE's inclusive framework. They were leadership and management, the whole school environment, pupil wellbeing and staff wellbeing. And in a 10-minute panel discussion, really, I won't be able to speak to all 4 themes. So if I spend a bit of time on pupil and staff wellbeing, I think that might be of most use. So with pupil and staff wellbeing, we would have started by looking at our well-being policy that was part of our school improvement policy, and we kind of said, well, what kind of a lens are we looking at through? And we were looking in the context of being in the midst of a global pandemic. We looked what is best evidence-based practice here. We would have attended a lot of CPD on trauma-informed and trauma-infused education, because a global pandemic is likely to bring a certain amount of trauma, and that trauma can mean very different things for very different people, for people in our school community. We engage with pupil voice and their parents, and also consultation with outside agencies. So when pupils returned, like Niamh and Ashlyn, we did give them time to settle in. We factored in rest. We tried to factor in certainty, and keeping in, within trauma-informed principles, we tried to reintroduce routine elements of celebration, and where we could, things like weekly assemblies, just to bring us together as a school community. I suppose it's only this year that we've really started analysing our testing, and really trying to make that testing work for us. Because with pupil wellbeing, as it's conceptualised in the inclusive framework, there's a big emphasis on potential, and that came up in the keynote address earlier as well. So there was testing, but also with that testing and kind of analysing the testing and seeing where the gaps in attainment were, we were also gathering a lot of pupil voice about what pupils felt they needed, what they were looking forward to in coming back to school, what they were going to miss from the homeschooling experience as well. In our planning, we really emphasised our outdoor environment. Like Niamh and Ashlyn, we are a city school, but we still benefit from an absolutely gorgeous outdoor environment. We use that. Children were going on daily walks. They were using outdoor spaces. Also, very much like Niamh, we would have used a positive psychology or a positive education approach. Character strengths would be a core feature of our support plans, and we would use the VIA Youths Assessment in our support plans, and we would try and build interventions and supports around children's individual strengths. Other areas in positive education, like growth mindset, gratitude journals, all of those would have formed part of different children's support plans. So they would be just some of the things we would have done in relation to pupil wellbeing. As a leadership team, we realised coming back, and we realised during the lockdown, that staff wellbeing would be so important, that it would be so important for the adults to be as well and as happy and as supported as possible, for the children then in turn to feel happy, well and supported. So theme 5 in the inclusive framework is staff wellbeing, and I suppose there's different kind of layers to staff wellbeing. For sure, we might have had the cakes on Fridays, but we went deeper. So things like the principal checking and connecting with every staff member in the morning, no matter how busy things were. My principal sometimes calls it her farm walk, and she goes around and she does check and connect with every child and every member of staff in our school. Communication was very important. Communication, we're working towards becoming a restorative school, so our conversations are very restorative in nature, but we also, from a very practical sense, had to make sure that every decision that was being made, and sometimes very decisions that had to happen very quickly, were communicated well to staff. Myself and the principal would have engaged with the Centre for School Leadership with coaching to attend to our own well-being. And it's nearly a cliche at this stage, but like we know we can't pour from an empty cup. So trying to be a support to each other as a leadership team would have been a core, and still is a core feature of our staff well-being plan. So If I was to summarise what has worked well for us in our return to school, it would be our strong relational approach that's based on core values of kindness, care and inclusion, using supportive frameworks, establishing priorities, but recognising the need for flexibility with those priorities. I think the strong commitment of our school community and the leadership team up to board level to inclusion, well-being and including postgraduate involvement with areas of inclusion and well-being as well. We had the foundation of a very strong and collaboratively designed SEN and inclusion policy, which actually has been so helpful when we've had to make hard decisions about assigning support and prioritising support. Also, wider support networks like our local NCSC, CINO has been an invaluable support. The IPPN and the NCSC and the great resources that they would have developed throughout the lockdown, and also our community of local schools as well have been very helpful. There have been some challenges. If I was to summarise the top two challenges, it's, well, three actually. First of all, there is a global pandemic, and if that isn't a challenge, I don't know what is. Time is, there just never seems to be enough time for the planning that's involved in a successful return to school. And then human resources, having enough adults in the school to support our children. As Minister Madigan said, we must continue to do more. We have to strive for more. So even though we have a good plan, we're going to continue to improve our plan, and we are going to strive for more. Thank you very much. Fiona.
Thanks. Thanks, Claire. So my name is Fiona Temple, and I am principal of a post-primary school in Donegal, so I'm here to represent the other side of the country. You'll know that from my accent. We can't really disguise Donegal, and nor should we. I find it really interesting as a post-primary principal that some of the things that I'm going to talk about have already been mentioned. Our settings are all very different, but yet in many ways our approaches have been very similar. So to put us, I suppose, in a bit of context, so as I say, I'm based in Donegal in Mulroy College, a post-primary school. So on any given day, we have approximately 630 people walking around our building in a very, very small concentrated space. So that's 650 different personalities that all have to get on or at least exist together through the day. So out of that, we have 560 of those are teenagers of various different ages, different backgrounds, different personalities, different ways of looking at things, different ways of accessing information and different ways of managing themselves, different ways of impacting each other, and of course, different learning styles. So from our cohort of students, we have over 100 of those would access special educational needs. We also have an autism class in the school. And we're mixed. We have boys and girls. We're quite rural in our setting as well. And as I said, we don't have a lot of space, so we're at full capacity, and space has been one of our challenges through the pandemic and managing ourselves as an organisation. And I'm just going to add something that happens every day, because we have an added challenge that every single morning, myself and the caretaker go on a treasure hunt. It feels like a treasure hunt every morning, because we have a leaking roof. So every day we walk around the building to see where the latest puddle is, to try to ensure that no one falls or slips. And I'm mentioning that because I really feel that we start our day firefighting, and I feel that we have been firefighting since March 2020. And I feel that schools have done an incredible job in that. So when we looked at reopening from our closure, there was so much to consider. We had to look at the physical building, we had to look at all of the challenges, how we operate every day, how timetables changed, all of those things, and some have been referred to earlier. We also had to look at the impact on teaching and learning, but for us it was about the impact on people first. The impact on those vulnerable, in particular, the vulnerable students and the vulnerable members of our school community were going to be impacted more. But it became very clear at the very beginning that this level of change and what was happening in the world was creating a level of anxiety that was affecting all of us. So we had to consider that in all of our future planning. All of a sudden, we were in a world where everyone was anxious. No one had answers. Adults didn't have all the answers and still don't. And as adults and leaders in education, we had to settle ourselves with that. To all of a sudden be in an environment where we were leading young people in education, where we ourselves didn't have the answer. So at that point, the most important thing for me as a leader in a school and as our leadership team in the school also, the most important thing was to be able to give reassurance, to everyone. So no matter what we did from that moment on, it was really important that we stopped and we listened, that we would listen and hear how everyone was affected. We had to hear what the fears were about returning, what the fears were about the impact long term, before we could actually make a plan to move forward. So we surveyed everyone. We surveyed all of our staff, all of our parents, all of our students, to hear where they were all at. And from that, we could categorise then what we needed to do from an organisational point of view, how to manage behaviour, and I suppose from a long-term point of view of how all of this was going to affect everyone. And we realised fairly quickly the most important thing was communication and clarity. And I think from what some of our speakers have said already today, some of the challenges that you faced in this as well was making sure that everyone remained connected. We're a school community, and for me that community is our staff, our parents and our students. And how do we all feel connected while we're trying to be socially distanced, while we're wearing face masks and trying to spread ourselves out? But in identifying fears, we were able to relay those back to people, and I think that in itself gave people reassurance because they could hear, I'm not the only one that's feeling this way. So then we started planning things together. Now our doors remained closed to parents, but communication could not, and that was key. And our students were no longer allowed to mix within year groups, but they still needed a social element to school. So we looked at how we communicate. A lot of emails were sent, and before everybody came back into school, we had to ensure there was clarity on what the school was going to look like, not just for our students with special educational needs, but for everybody. We recorded some video messages and sent those out, so there was a more personal approach to that, and that it wasn't just reading text all the time. During lockdown, when we were surveying our students, our parents and our staff, that was the one thing we kept hearing back. We don't feel connected. So where we could have a personal approach to that, it helped. So we started then looking at, when we come back to school, how can we have that connectivity? So as year groups, we would have set tasks during lockdown, and we tried to continue that for year groups, like asking them maybe to send out a letter to someone in the community that is possibly less connected to other members of the community. Asking our students maybe in first year to have an appreciation journal, things like that. In our school diary, we put in a section on growth mindset, which I think is really interesting that other speakers have mentioned that. We put in a section on goals and targets because it was about giving us back control. We felt it was really important that all of our students have hope and can plan forward, even in a time when there is uncertainty. Those goals and targets are set weekly. Class teachers work with students on that. Parents communicate with their students on this as well. Sometimes we don't reach our goals, and that's okay too, and that's a really important learning for our students, for us as adults as well, to have an understanding that it's okay not to reach your goals at times, but review and reflect as you go. And then we have things like every year group chooses an uplifting song that we play out on our intercom on a Friday as we leave the school. It's almost like a celebration, and I think it's important that we acknowledge and we celebrate the fact that we are managing, that we are doing well as a community. When it comes to teaching and learning, I suppose for me at the very beginning when we came back, I was careful of language, and there was a lot of panic amongst staff about we have to catch up, we have to get this curriculum done. There's a panic there when we talk about leave insert in particular. So for me, I felt the language around that was really, really important. So for me, it wasn't about catching up. And it's not lost time. This has happened. It's happened the whole world. And we've all been impacted by this. But this is an opportunity. And this, for me, was an opportunity to teach some of the most valuable lessons in life for any of our young people. How to manage change, how to build resilience, how to identify struggles, and how to look for help in that. And if our young people leave with a Leave Insert programme or whichever programme of choice they take, and they have those skills in life, for me that is a huge achievement and that is great success. We did focus in all of our learning support for junior students, numeracy, literacy, managing myself, and we put in a lot of team teaching. In senior cycle, we looked at managing myself, a lot of team teaching, and then put in a big concentration on study skills, how to learn. We're part of the One Good School programme with Jigsaw. We had started that programme before the pandemic, but it really kicked in for us during the pandemic. We are a restorative school. Claire mentioned that earlier. And we have been for a long time, but we've gone back to basics in that and retrained ourselves and retrained our staff. So for me, everything has always in school been about minding people, minding relationships, keeping the community connected. And if we do that, then we create a really, really successful teaching and learning environment that is also safe and caring for all of our students, staff and parents. And I think that's what all of us have been saying all the way through this, about having that safe environment for everyone. So thanks very much.
That's great. I found that to be a very informative and impressive session. Before I go to Jennifer to see if there are any questions, do any of the four of you want to ask each other questions or reflect on the other presentations?
I might just come in. I think it's really interesting that there is a lot of commonality between the four schools, as diverse and all as we are. But in saying that, it has taken a global pandemic for us to sit back and acknowledge the importance of well-being. And this is something that so many of us were already doing. And I think as teachers, it's in our nature to look after the children and to create that safe environment. But I think the pandemic has really pushed that to the forefront. And we've seen it has placed the value on education and the value of creating that safe space for our children. And I think that is something, when we're looking at the takeaways and the positives from the pandemic, that is something massive and really, really of great value.
And then thanks
There's
for that.
something that
Fiona,
just came to mind when we were all talking there today, because as educators and as leaders in education, I think our focus is always on young people, as it should be, and on the learning environment. But as you say, Niamh, this has made us reflect on well-being, but it's really also made us concentrate on the well-being of our staff, of our parents, of our entire school community. which I think we always did, but we have done it with more focus now.
Yeah.
We've become a bit more real with that as well. And I think it's very important that it's mentioned and it's acknowledged as well.
Yeah.
That it's not just about looking at students, it's about looking at everybody that supports the students, the whole community that does that.
When you spoke, Fiona, about a community, we're a developing school, so we were setting up a community anyway, you know, we're starting again, or starting afresh rather, to create it, but it actually brought the community even more together.
Yeah.
It formed a community that was very much, this was our approach in the school. You know, we had the video sent out that the parents got to know the teachers a little bit better, tweeting, nice, just little small touches that brought a smile to people's faces in a very anxious time.
Yeah.
But there were positives. It has created a very strong sense of community.
Yeah.